Well, to Venice next, where the day tripper tax is relaunching this week. The fee has now doubled to €10 for last-minute visitors. It's a tax that targets what the city calls eat and flee tourists who arrive with packed lunches and leave without contributing much to the local economy. City officials say the levy is meant to dissuade people from going during peak periods, but it's not without its controversy. Well, let's get all the details on that with Samir Hosany, professor at Royal Holloway University in London. It's great to have you with us on the program today. Before we get into the tax itself, give us a picture of the state of overtourism in Venice at the moment.
Thank you very much for having me. As you mentioned in your report, that was made to, in a way, control tourists in arrivals. That was established last year for the tax. Unfortunately, it didn't really work as it should be, and Venice is still attracting around 70,000 visitors per day and roughly around 30 million visitors annually. So the tax was made to really sort of curtail the number of tourists, arriving, in Venice, especially, what they call the day trippers. And last year was a pilot. And for this year, they double the amount. So that's gone from €5 to €10. And also as extended from 30 days to around 54 days, mostly around weekend.
And when the city collects this tax, I believe it was around €2.8 million last year. What are these funds used for, essentially?
Yeah, what happened from what they've collected last year, that money didn't even cover the cost of running the system itself. So in a way, it's still early days, but I think it's more about at the time is to show the UNESCO that they are doing something to protect the World Heritage Site, and that's why they introduced the day trip tax of €5. We'll have to see whether that's going to be enough. And quite often, people want to come to Venice, but on a daily basis. €5 is not something that they would feel is too expensive to pay. So that's why there has been criticism about the scheme itself, whether it's really controlling the tourist arrival in Venice.
Now, you mentioned UNESCO, and the city's also fallen under the scrutiny of UNESCO, who says that not enough is being done to protect the fragile city. So what more can be done, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think part of the tax that's been introduced was really to address UNESCO concern. They had to really do something. Otherwise they would have been taken off that list of the World Heritage Sites. Listen, Venice is a tourist destination, very famous around the world. People would want to come, and have part of their to-do list, as part of a memorable experience. So they would still come. Perhaps we need to be thinking of increasing that tax to perhaps around €100. There are countries around the world, such as Bhutan, for example, that introduce a very, very high levy. Bhutan is one of the country that has the highest tax on visitors at $100, and for them, they've seen some of those effects in a way that they've been controlling tourists coming to the destination. At the same time, the money they've been recovering from that scheme, they've been reinvesting it and try to make the destination more sustainable.
And when it comes to protecting a city like Venice, which is obviously extremely fragile, tourism is not the only threat, is it? I mean, there are other factors like climate change at play.
Yes, definitely. I think you need to really, say, that's not sustainable at all, with the amount of tourists coming to a place like Venice, yes, definitely there's climate change. And what we also see, nowadays is there is a bit of a shift from this traditional mass tourist to more something around what we call slow tourism, where people would come and engage with the local and try to be a little bit more sustainable and responsible in terms of the activities that they do at the destination. That perhaps include, spending longer days at the destination and, and hanging around with the locals and hiking. So there are destinations that sort of more promoting this idea about slow tourism. But it's quite difficult to see, a place like Venice, suddenly moving away from that traditional sort of mass over tourism to suddenly be a place where slow tourism would be the main focus.
But it's not a phenomenon that's necessarily unique to Venice, is it? I mean, popular destinations like Rome and Barcelona are prime examples of this. So, in your opinion, what is the most effective way in combating over-tourism?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. As academics, we've been looking around, whether a fee, like a tax, would that really work, or that doesn't work? I know there's different ways of even introducing the tax. Some of them do it, per visitor. Some of them would take a percentage of the overnight stay in that accommodation stay. So I think it does require, various stakeholders working together. Barcelona had a similar scheme, and still, what they've done, they've managed to control the flow of tourists, and they have not been able to sort of significantly reduce the number of tourists coming to the destination. So I think it does require a bit of, the tourists, themselves, perhaps, finding other places to go. Having said that, if you're a very popular destination and you want to be, been there, done it, get the T-shirt, you would still travel. So it's quite difficult to really, in a way, especially now where, the advent of social media, where we see a lot of, people going and traveling, and then also, posting on social media about the travel. So I would say it does require a lot of involvement of various stakeholders, including the tourists, the local destination, and also various authorities to really tackle the problem of over tourism.
Professor Samir Hosany from the Royal Holloway University in London, it's great to hear your thoughts. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thank you.